One of the most beautiful experiences we as language learners can have is to start learning a new language, to discover those words, to hear them for the first time, to hear ourselves speaking the language for the first time. And for the nerds among us, to discover new grammatical structures. Now, I found that starting out well in learning a new language is key, as it gives me a quick feeling of confidence that helps me to continue learning the language and therefore to reach a higher level of fluency. So I would like to break down this video into 4 parts, 4 insights into language learning that I have achieved over the last few years. If you're new here, my name is Alex, and I've been passionate about learning languages for a long time. Over the last few years, I have learned several languages and I have gained a lot of insights into the language learning process, both through my personal experience and also through other people. And this is what I would like to share with you today. Tip number 1, get started. The first step is to just get started, to learn the first few words. Now, this is obvious, of course, but I found that what holds back a lot of people is a fear of committing themselves to learning a language. And that is understandable because learning a language does take a very long time. But as we all know, it doesn't help to stand in fear in front of a mountain. If we want to reach the top of the mountain, we have to start walking at some point. And in the exact same way, when we learn a language, we have to start somewhere. It doesn't really matter so much where. You can buy a textbook, you can use Duolingo, you can start directly watching a film or reading a text, as long as you start somewhere. When I started learning Japanese, I didn't really research so much beforehand how difficult it is to learn Japanese or how long it would take. I just started using an app and then I went over afterwards to a textbook. And it wasn't until several months later when I realized how difficult Japanese really is. But at that point, I was already very invested in the language. I had already reached a basic understanding, and so it made sense to just keep on going despite the difficulty of the language. But if I had spent a lot of time beforehand fearing how difficult it would be to learn Japanese, I might never even have started learning it. Where you start from. By this I mean, which languages do you already speak? Because that's the basis from which you start learning another language. This is quite important because if you are trying to learn a language that is very similar to one that you already speak, such as a Spanish speaker trying to learn Portuguese, I would have a very different approach compared to a Spanish speaker trying to learn Hindi. Because with these languages that are close to each other, such as Spanish, Portuguese, German, Dutch, Danish, Swedish, you're not really learning a new language. You're rather learning how that language is different from the language that you already know. And so in that case, I would recommend starting directly by watching videos or trying to read something, perhaps not a novel, but read a blog post or something like that. But if you start to learn a language that is very different from the languages you already speak, then in my experience, you have to go through a slower process, starting with a textbook, learning basic words, and spending some time before you go on to read actually text or listening to something, because initially it would otherwise only be noise. Now, in the case of English, unfortunately, there aren't any languages that are really closely related to it, if we don't count Scots as a language. And so for a monolingual English speaker, any language you learn, you would probably have to spend some time learning the basics before you can go on to read a longer text or watch a video. Basic words and complex sentences. Now this has 2 parts, so let's start with the basic words. Obviously, when we start learning a language, we start with learning the basic words. But what are these basic words? In my experience, I start usually by learning the first and second person, I, you, and some verbs such as I think, I want, I learn, this or that. Because that is, in my experience, the type of sentences that I would say the most often when I start learning a language. I find that so many textbooks insist on starting by teaching greetings and the names of various family members. Now, I don't usually learn that when I start a new language because I don't really greet people that often, and I almost never talk to a stranger in a different language about my uncle or my mother-in-law. The second part is complex sentences. Now, when I say complex sentences, I don't mean sentences that are difficult to understand. I mean sentences that are more than just subject, verb, object, such as I eat food, I walk outside. I would try to immediately learn the basic conjunctions such as because, but, therefore. I find that these are very basic words that are part of any natural sentence. I don't think it's natural to speak in only such short subject, verb, object sentences. And so I would usually try to immediately learn how to say I eat food because this or that. I learn Japanese because I like it, but I don't learn that language. I don't think that any native speaker would consider such a sentence to be complicated, yet I find that many courses would delay teaching how to say such a sentence until chapter 10 or something. The way I would do it is in an Excel sheet. Yeah, sorry, that's the engineer in me. And as you can see, I would write down how to say I and you, first and second person, then the basic 5 or 10 verbs and nouns. And then I would learn how to form easy, complex sentences with these words using but, because, therefore, and so on. Open your mind and don't ask why. When we study something at school, such as physics or biology, we are usually encouraged to ask why something is in a certain way because we need to understand it. But that doesn't really apply to language learning in my experience. Yes, every language has different grammar rules, different ways of saying things, but there is not really a specific why it is like that. It just is. It just developed like that over time. As an example, in English, we say you know and he knows. Now, why is there an S at the end if we say he? Well, certainly we could research that. We could look at history and find some event when grammar changed in a certain way that added an S at the end of know. But that doesn't change the fact that that's the way people speak. And if you asked a native speaker, most of them would answer, that's just the way we speak. And so I find that it really helps to just accept the fact that a language is in a certain way and not always ask why it is in that way. So when we start learning a language, it's really important to open our minds to a different way of expressing things without judgment. And I keep coming back to Japanese, but that's because that language is so different from Western languages. But when I was studying Japanese, I did initially try to understand why things are expressed in this way or in that way. But at some point that will drive you crazy. And then I realized that learning a language is so different from learning maths or learning physics. Because every child learns its mother tongue without ever asking why a certain grammar rule is like this, or without ever thinking that this is a weird way of saying things, without ever judging the language. That is what really clicked with me, to try to put myself in the position of a child again, of someone who doesn't know any language, and to absorb the language that I'm learning without judging it, as if everything in this language was the most obvious way of expressing things. Now, obviously, it's difficult to do that completely, but I think that could be a guidance of how to approach starting a language. I hope you found some value in these tips. If you have any other advice on how to start learning a language, please let me know in the comments below, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye, have a nice day.